Okay, so there was a request to do the video analysis for the individual that we saw run during the course this past weekend. And so I've gone through the web app for Yogger for each of the different planes, and then I will also pull up the Stanford Excel spreadsheet for a running analysis in order to be able to kind of walk us through that again. So we're going to start in the anterior plane since we're already here. So for each limb, was there a crossover? The answer was no. Hip adduction angle, you can see this drawn in. It says 99, so there's a 9-degree drop during the stance on the left leg. So if we put in a 9 there, and then we'll tab over to, we'll do the right leg here in a minute. In the varus, there was no varus or valgus angle. It was actually, at least on this side, a pure straight line at 180 degrees or 0 degrees. When we look at the right, so we were at 7 degrees, and I'm taking that off of the 97. There was a 5-degree knee varus, which is kind of borderline, but enough that there's slight deviation. And even if we manipulated this to be a little bit more centered, I would even say that that's probably more bisection of the lower shank. Again, with the understanding that there's about a 3 to 5 degree error rating depending on the metric that we're talking about. So 5 or 6, it doesn't much matter. It's within that kind of areas for mild improvement. So I can simply navigate back to our library where I've saved the other images in the sagittal plane. I'm just going to refresh my page so that those additional screenshots populate. All right, so let's move ourselves into the posterior view. So if we click on this, we should be able to potentially expand it. Yeah, so then in the sagittal plane, so we will analyze first the left leg. So anterior trunk angle, we have here is one that says 171. So that's going to be 9 degrees. The trunk flexion angle would be, says 167. So that's going to be 13. And then we're going to look at 38 degrees of knee flexion. And then knee past toe, I would say if we drop it down from the center, I would say yes. And then anterior pelvic tilt, we will look in a different plane, but I believe that the answer is no. Actually, it is more than 9 degrees. I think it's actually, yeah, we'll look at that in a moment. And then if we look at the right hip, so it says 164, so we're looking at 16 degrees of hip flexion. Trunk angle would be the same. I measured that, it's not shown here, 46 degrees. So a little bit more compliant on the right leg as compared to the left. And I recognize that the lines aren't matching up. It's just because it's a screenshot. But when it was actually measured, the angles were properly matched to the joint center angles. And in fact, it may be because I had zoomed in on it. I'm not quite sure, but and then we're at 105. Which would be 15 degrees of dorsiflexion. In knee past toe, we would say no for this. If we go center of knee joint, drop it down. Actually, I take that back. I think it's consistent with the other side. anterior pelvic tilt. So stance reversal, the angle of dorsiflexion that we're in, as I mentioned, was 105, and that's where this angle goes. So it would be at 15 degrees of dorsiflexion. And then for the left, we did not actually write that one down, and that was actually identical. So 15 and 15 respectively. And I actually swapped those. I wrote the right one in here, but because they're the same, it actually doesn't matter. All right, moving on to still in the sagittal plane. Let's look at the anterior pelvic tilt. Again, the lines have shifted since I saved it, but it would be otherwise the same. And so we're at 167 versus 166, which statistically those would be the same, just given the amount of error within the measurement of this. So we would be at 13 degrees on the left, or excuse me, on the right. And then on the left, we're at 14. And then frontal plane, trunk angle for lateral flexion. So we're at 176 versus 177. All right, so for our trunk angle, we minus the 176 and the 177 respectively. So that should be actually 4 degrees. That's very good. And then contralateral pelvic tilt. So 173 versus our 180, right? So that would put that for 7 degrees during stance.
Really? Wow. You cook for the wifey? You do?
And then we have 5 there, which is great.
That's Isla.
The cadence I don't have at the moment. And then if we look at the sagittal plane initial contact, I believe we have that. Then
We're doing low back.
yeah, so with the distortion that has come with the screenshots, I would probably use, historically, I would probably use more of the screenshot feature built in within, not built within the app itself, but rather with that of just the snipping tool within my computer for the time being, because it seems like they have shifted, but the values are the same. So irrespective of that. So let's start on the left. So at the hip, we're at 167. So she starts at 6 degrees of hip, 16 degrees of hip flexion. Knee is at 5 degrees at initial contact. And then we are at 97 degrees. And this is week 5. This would be 5 if we're going to keep that the same numerical orientation around 97 degrees. And then this is going to be 94 for the right leg. We're going to look at the hip at 155. Sorry, 165. Maybe that's accurate. 155. So then that would be 35. That's a lot more than what she demonstrated on the opposite hip. That'd be 25. That's right. So a little bit more extended on the right versus the left. And I believe that based off what we're seeing as far as where our heel's hitting relative to our center of mass. And then we have 10 degrees of knee flexion. All right, and then so taking everything into account, it's actually the sagittal plane where there seems to be potentially the areas for greatest improvement, with the left being a little bit more, with a little bit more hip flexion, a little bit more trunk lean may help to facilitate that. And then with a knee past toe, that I think also a little bit more front forward trunk lean would shift it a little bit more to the hip, potentially reducing those red dots there. Overall, it seems like the majority of the shock absorption is coming from the knee on both sides. The other thing is that things seem to be a little bit stiffer on the left. There's less shock absorption, and we can see that at pretty much every joint, both at the hip, 3 versus 9, 8 versus 11, and then 36 versus 33. So, again, if we're trying to mitigate or reduce change as little as possible, then what we would want to potentially do in this case would be facilitating a little bit more of a trunk lean, which and that would help to facilitate a little bit more trunk flexion, potentially a little bit more knee past toe. I would be interested at looking at the strength of the major muscle groups on the left leg versus the right, given the lack of shock absorption and flexion angle, the joint excursions that we're seeing on that left side versus the right. And I think that may help elucidate why things are actually landing a little bit stiffer and not shock absorption as well on that left leg as compared to the right. But yeah, that would be the interpretation.